I'll talk a bit about sports writing and the different styles and genres with examples from over the years. The first one is a book I just happened to own when I was a kid, but found really fascinating, and I would reread it quite often. It's called The Shortstop by Zane Grey, and I think it came out in about 1905, something like that. My copy was old and worn, and it had that really cheap brown wood pulp paper, the kind that was starting to crackle whenever you turned a page. No dust jackets. If it ever had one, it probably didn't survive. That would probably be quite valuable if I had it nowadays. Oh well. The Shortstop is a good example of sports romance, especially the kind aimed at young people, boys in this case. This is a good example of sort of boys' romance from before World War One, when the idea of a mass popular literature was still relatively new in American life. This is when some other great sort of youth romance stuff started to come along. Hardy Boys, Tom Swift, the cowboy stuff, the dime novels. The Shortstop, it definitely fits into this category. The author is Zane Grey, who I don't think was particularly famous yet, but would eventually become one of the most famous writers in America. He wrote westerns and other such adventure novels. His most famous, I think, was called Riders of the Purple Sage. Just listen to that title. Riders of the Purple Sage. Just tells you everything you need to know. He was also an accomplished deep water fisherman and had several records for species catches for a while. He would apparently spend the money he made writing on these long adventurous trips, and he wrote about that as well later in his life. But this is when he's young and started still building a reputation. And The Shortstop is just a good example of the kind of sports book, which I believe they're still writing, is this kind of like finding everything you want through being good at a sport. That's kind of the romance. So the Shortstop concerns a young man named Chase Alloway, and he is working at the mill when he's like 16 or so to support his mother and his brother. His brother has some sort of disability, which I do not recall. His father is gone, and he plays on the mill team, plays baseball. Professional baseball is very messy at this stage. There are like the major leagues, but there's just tons of independent leagues, minor leagues, semi-pro. There's all these factory teams. In some ways, this is baseball's golden age, when it really didn't have any competition as the national sport. Basketball had just been invented. Hockey was Canadian. Football was popular, but it was like a college thing, and it hadn't yet reached pro status. This is when the assumption was boys played baseball, and Chase realizes he's quite good and can make more money as an athlete to support his family and sort of seek his fortune. And he goes on this quest to become an athlete instead of working in the mill all the time. He does well at first. He's a pitcher, but he gets in trouble for throwing what we would now call a curveball, which I think in the book they call like a trick ball or a hoodoo ball. There's like this implication, this was true for a while in baseball, that certain pitches are just not fair. And I think Charles Cummings, who one of the first pitchers to be known to throw a curveball, was actually banned from using it for a while. So Chase eventually gets this reputation as using a trick ball, and then no one will hire him. This doesn't seem that plausible, but they don't have to seem plausible in a romance. The point is, he encounters his first great obstacle. How is he going to respond to it? Well, even though a reputation gets around quickly, he manages to come to the Ohio town of Findlay. This is the golden age of Ohio industry. This is when Ohio was like Silicon Valley. They were doing steel and automobile and rubber and inventing the blimp, and I mean, just the air. So Findlay is like an important place, and the manager there has some pity on him and suggests that they reinvent him as a regular player, not a pitcher. So he puts Chase at shortstop, and Chase, throughout the book, embarks on sort of some of the standard romantic overcoming of standard obstacles for these sorts of sports books. First, there's acceptance by the other players. There's showing that he has what it takes to compete with players on the other team, players who might be playing dirty. Baseball had a very raucous reputation at the time that really it was kind of like wrestling in the 80s. It was seen as maybe not something that was good for kids to see, and an entertainment for sort of low down dirty men. The admission to the park was quite cheap on purpose, and the attitude among the fans and the bleachers was there's all this yelling, and if you ever watch the movie 8 Men Out, you can get a good vibe. But just imagine even earlier at a minor league level, there's this association with like dirt and crassness, and the leagues did this did lead them to sort of like respond to this by sort of championing various players of the time as models of honesty, and to talk about how the good that sports does for people, and they didn't want this is the age in which opposition to alcohol was coming, so the association between sports and drinking was strong, so they would make a point of stressing that certain players were not drinkers or were teetotalers or something, that kind of thing. So this is the environment that Chase has to inhabit. He also has to he's managing his fame in Findlay, because of course he's very good and becomes a very popular player, so he has to learn to manage that. He falls in love with a young woman from a nice home, and he has to manage the stigma of her being associated with a ball player. And they have these road trips where crazy pranks happen, or the fans of the home teams treat them badly, or they have to get out of these scrapes or whatever. It's all presented with that kind of romantic flair for fun, and one event just generally follows another, building up to the final showdown with like their big opposing team, and a lot hangs on that, because if they can win, they'll get the attention of the bigger league clubs, which maybe means their best players like Chase will get good contracts that will in his case allow him to not only support his mother and his sick brother, but perhaps marry this young woman, because he'll be making a good salary, and he's shown that he's like a gentleman. And they have the various kind of like fun sports on the field antics or achievements. But like with a lot of sports fiction, the stuff on the field is meant to display the challenges that are going on off the field. So it's not so much are they going to win the game, it's how are they going to win the game. Are they going to win the game by grit or trickery, or by coming together as a group around a shared goal? Those are the main elements of the fiction. And the shortstop has one element that, looking back, is quite good for a work of boys fiction. Is it sort of asks the question of what is the point of sports in a small community at all? Should there be any limits on it? What is the role that it plays? And this comes out through the following series of events. The owner of the Findlay squad finds out that there is a lot of interest among the working men in seeing a game, but they can't. They work a 6-day week. Their only day off is Sunday. And there's this like question of, is it okay to have a baseball game on a Sunday? Sunday's for the Lord. A lot of businesses shut up shop. You get the impression there might be some blue light laws going on. in Finley at the time. Uh, Finley really gives me a prohibitionist temperance movement vibe, so there's probably some of that. But the money on offer is just too good. He could fill the stadium easily, so he starts holding games on Sundays. This doesn't really bother most of the players. They're just kind of show up and do it kind of guys. But Chase gives it some thought, and he does at least see the other side's point of view, which is that the Sunday's the Lord's Day, and you know he shouldn't be working. This is his job. But there's a really good passage in the book when he comes out to the first game, and these guys who are watching are just so into it. They're so excited. This is such a release for them from the monotony of the factories and the uh, the the tedium of their lives. Oh, hang on, sorry, my oven's calling. For these working guys to be released from supervision or from the need to sort of behave at home with their families or at church, and it's just this it's this kind of all male boys atmosphere where they can yell and they can enjoy the drama of the sport. And there's something here about the birth of like popular sports as just a major element in American social life, which was about to get even bigger in the 20s with like radio and things like this. We'll talk about that later. But you can just see like the need, the hunger these guys have. And Chase sees this when he goes up to the bat, and they are just all in. They know him, and they know his reputation as a great player, and it really inspires him. He sort of grits and determines. He's like, hell yeah, I'm going to win for you guys. You guys have it tough. He's been in the mill. He knows, what it's like. So he plays a great game, and, just the cheers and the roars, and, he sort of feels anew his role in this community to like champion these guys and to give them some of the drama and the thrill of victory, if he can, in lives that don't always have clear victories. So the nice people in town sue the club, and they have like a hearing, public hearing in town where he goes to testify along with his girlfriend, and he testifies about he himself was in the mill and how ball players have this undeserved bad reputation, but a lot of them are just decent guys trying to make a living. And he testifies how he thinks it's a good idea that they have games that these factory hands can attend, and how it brings them together and it gives them some release from life. And it's a nice long passage championing indirectly like free speech and communal engagement with problems. And they hammer out this compromise where they say, well, Sunday, we really like our Sundays the way they are, and we think it's good for these guys to be part of that. So we are going to make a town rule that gives every factory, they got to quit work early on Saturday. So it's like basically they're 5.5 day week, and that will be when they can enjoy the baseball, and that'll be when you guys can make your money and add this, because we do recognize that this is an important addition to our town's life, and it's a nice, intelligent compromise. It's a good example of local politics. It's romanticized, of course. Everything's a little faster and smoother because we got to get on to the rest of the book, but it is a pleasant thing to see. In a work of fiction, just championing the idea of getting everybody's interest on the table and listening well and creating a solution that just about serves everybody's interests. We don't really hear what the factory owners think about this sudden reduction in their workforce. Presumably they might add some hours onto the rest of the days, but you get the impression that, generally speaking, that this works out well. And in that sense, of course, it's a romance where things do work out well, better than they do in real life, and we can move on to the next chapter of the book and whatever challenge it might bring, with the knowledge that too will eventually be resolved, and the happy endings of Chase getting a contract from the big clubs and winning the love of this proper middle class Becky Thatcher type of heroine, Also, there's this like kid with a disability who loves the team and who feels mocked by his stigma, and he comes through for the team at a key moment and helps them win a game, and he becomes a town hero. I mean, just everything works out really, really well. I do not have anything against this type of literature. It is one of the main things that literature can offer is a universe where things go better than they usually go in real life. And um, escapism is partly because there's a lot to escape from, and it's interesting to see it begin to play out in the world of sports, since sports, of course, are very directly an escape from the difficulties and pressures and ambiguities of daily life. Instead, we can just focus in on, will they make their yardage this down, or will he get a hit? Will they get the shot? This is what they offer, is a sort of narrowing and simplification of life's challenges down to something that's like easily apprehensible. I hope that's a word. It should be. Apprehensible? Why not? Okay, so that's the first sports book that I wanted to talk about, and then next we'll move on to some other ones.